Okay, folks, we are live on the YouTube channel now, and hopefully we don't have any freeze ups this go around. But anyway, welcome to the Whitfield Report podcast. I am the aforementioned Sam Whitfield, broadcasting here from Florida, and joining me tonight is for the sixth time on this podcast is my good friend and co-editor at American Watchman, Joshua Johnson. I should really just name him co-host of the show at this point because he's on so much when I'm not doing the podcast solo.
Has
But
it been six times? I
uh,
feel like it's been six times already. But
yeah, I mean, I mean, well, we talk so much on and off air that it's probably it probably feels more than that. But anyway, we're here. So we're here tonight. We're recording this on Friday, October 20th, 2017. But those who are listening on the audio version of the podcast, you'll hear this tomorrow on Saturday. So on the podcast over the past few weeks, I've been covering a myriad of different topics. Well, first of all, I relaunched the podcast 2 weeks ago, so you can find the new podcast page over at whitfieldreport.podium.com, and you can subscribe via iTunes, Google Play. We're on Stitcher now too, and we're hoping to get added to a few more podcasting platform services. But long story short, you can find the podcast on the big two now, which is iTunes and the Google Play Store. You can go to thesamwhitfield.com for my personal blog, which I really need to update, and then AmericanWatchman.com or .org, which is where Josh and I both write, and we have some really great new contributors there, so be sure to go check that out. Anyway, Josh and I have been meaning to do a podcast together for a while because there are a lot of topics that we both wanted to cover on air. I guess the first being, I know I didn't really tell you this before the show, but Josh, but it kind of seems strange to me that a few weeks ago, all the media was talking about was the Las Vegas shooting, and now we're hearing absolutely nothing on the matter. So, do you have any take on Vegas? Because I'm kind of
well, I guess what do you mean by a take on Vegas? Do you mean do I have a take on why they've stopped talking about it, or do
yeah.
just a take in general on what happened?
Why they've stopped talking on it in the media? Um,
Well, the last I heard about Vegas, they had they were discussing updating the timeline. Um, and that was because of a receipt that was found proving the guy had checked into the hotel sooner than they had anticipated. I guess the reason I don't really have a take on why they've stopped talking about it because to be honest with you, I don't think there was all that much there. I don't think they had any evidence. Well, I mean, they had evidence obviously, but they weren't able to find what the motive was, and that was what everybody wanted to know. And that was what and that sounds absolutely terrible saying it that way, but unfortunately, thanks to how the media handles these shootings, that's what it's almost become. It's like a TV drama almost, where they go out of their way to focus on the shooter, and I don't think they ought to do that. I think that just encourages other shooters. And what I mean by that is you have these crazy guys out there who want to go down in history or whatever, and they think the best way to do that is going and shooting up a bunch of innocent people.
yeah,
And I think, as far as I can tell, that may have been the guy's motive this time. I don't know. He was definitely crazy. He was definitely crazy, but they weren't able to find the motive, and then they just kind of stopped talking about it. Maybe they're probably still investigating, but these things take time, and and it's not like watching Law and Order where you get it all in an hour. So I think
Right.
I just stopped covering it because the cops they don't have any new breaking information. Now it's sort of the slow, tough part of the investigation.
Well, I said 2 weeks ago on the podcast on the relaunch episode. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that one yet, but I said about 2 weeks ago now on this podcast that I feel as if the media stopped talking about it as a whole because on the left wing media, it's pretty much been proven that this guy, at first, the left wing media tried to make this guy out to be like a left wing, you know, I mean, a right wing Trump supporter, uh, who was connected to the Trump campaign somehow. And once that narrative kind of uh, fell apart. Then they tried to tie it to the NRA, and then once that narrative fell apart, they kind of They kind of stopped talking about it because there was no narrative for them to push their agenda. Likewise, on some conservative outlets, not all of them, but on some of them, they tried tying the guy to ISIS and whatnot. But I mean, since there's been no conclusion that that's true at this time, it seemed as if the right wing media also kind of stopped talking about this too. So I think on both sides um, of the media, uh, they kind of lost interest because there was no narrative. There was
Oh yeah,
no
it's like I said, they've basically the media in this country have turned these mass shootings into TV television programs almost. You know, they have to have a story and they have to have a bad. Well, obviously there is a bad guy, but when I say a bad guy, I mean they have to find either it's the guns or either it's the Islamic terrorism, and sometimes it's just a crazy guy who had no discernible motive whatsoever.
right. And I mean, at this point, I mean, I hate to say this, but I'm kind of glad that that story faded from the news because, um, rather than I mean, I know this is going to sound horrible, but in the past we've had, uh, shootings where a shooting occurs, and then for the next 6 months it seems we're in an endless debate over gun control and and Islamic terrorism, and this country is so splintered as it is that I'm really kind of glad that we were able to kind of just bypass that this go around and come together as a nation um, this go around, if that makes sense.
I don't know if we came together really as a nation on it. I think it just kind of faded away before because we couldn't divide and that's pretty sad, really. You know, because we couldn't divide ourselves on it, the story just kind of faded. But
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you're actually right. I mean, maybe I was taking a little bit more of an optimistic approach. I guess my idea of coming together these days is the fact that we manage not to divide ourselves. You
you
know,
you ought to know better with me, Sam. The answer is always pessimistic when it comes from Josh on the political issues of the day.
oh
No,
no,
not always, not always. I tend to be a bit of a romantic, so it depends on the issue.
no, I'm a pessimist too. To the point where I shouldn't really admit this, but uh, on air, but I'm going to anyway because it's my podcast. Other than when I have to read stories for this podcast or do research for a column and whatnot, my interest in politics. I'm not as much of a political news junkie as I was when I was a teenager and first starting out. Like I still pay attention to politics, but I'm not glued to the Drudge Report or to the news app on my phone, as much as I was when I was younger and starting out. And maybe that's just because I've been through a few events in my life. I'm just kind of like over it. But I mean, I don't know.
I could do with unsubscribing or uninstalling from some of the news apps on my phone. Sometimes I think I've got quite a few on there, and I know what you're talking about. If I'll go to bed at night, I shut my phone. I'm old school, ladies and gentlemen. I uh, I shut my phone off still when I go to bed at night. I'm not like those other millennials that like to play on their phone all night. But I'll wake up in the morning, and it blows my mind that this much can happen in the news just in one 6 or 7 hour period. I'll go to bed at like midnight. I'll wake up again at 5 in the morning, and my phone, I'll turn it on, and then it'll be like a little atomic bomb going off or something. It'll just be dinging and vibrating and going crazy for like 15 minutes. And
Yeah,
I'll open it up, and it'll just be filled with news app notifications from what happened while I had it off.
same here. I don't turn my phone off because I use my phone as like an alarm clock. But when I plug mine at night, I turn mine into I turn airplane mode on mine, which is essentially turning it off without actually turning it off, if that makes sense. And
Oh,
and my phone pretty much does the same thing, as yours does. Plus, whenever something happens, people immediately like tweet at me at like 2 or 3 in the morning wanting to know my opinion on something, even though I'm asleep. So which I find that to be pretty interesting because um, you know, why would they want my opinion right then? So, but yeah, the news cycle. I mean, the news cycle has really become uh, an interesting thing, which kind of leads me to segue. Now the media's newest thing is an obsession with Harvey Weinstein and the whole, you know, uh, pedophilia slash sexual assault, scandal in Hollywood, which
did
I
he did he sexually assault an underage kid? I didn't know the pedophilia was in the mix. Is that
well, not with him directly, but this has brought up the issue now of like I guess 10 years ago there was that one kid who was a Disney star. I can't remember his name, but he he's been claiming for years that he was sexually molested at Disney, and at first no, at first everyone kind of dismissed it because he didn't really provide that much proof at the time. But now, people are starting to kind of relook over everything in Hollywood. Uh, Kind of every story of sexual assault, or molestation. And I mean, I guess here's kind of my whole take on this. Why are people so surprised that this is happening in Hollywood? I mean, we've heard about this for the last 75 or 80 years of rumors of this, going all the way back to Judy Garland in the Wizard of Oz.
I have an answer. I have an answer for you, Sam. Why they're all so allegedly surprised about the sexual abuse in Hollywood, and you'll have to forgive me if I seem a little bit slower tonight than normal. It's just it's somewhat late in this portion of the country, so my energy is starting to run low. But anyways, the reason that everybody is so obsessed with talking about Harvey Weinstein and about the sexual assault, and allow me to be specific. More specifically, I'm talking about. Have you noticed how everybody who talks about this tries to politicize it?
Yes,
The reason they
of
focus,
course.
the reason that the politicization of this is, well, first off, the whole reason it's politicized in the first place is because our culture has become such a burning trash heap. We are essentially an open air whorehouse at this point, especially Hollywood. That nobody wants to talk about. Can you imagine if this came out in the 1950s? What would the late night talk show hosts be making jokes about? Oh well, all men are. This is obviously proof that we're living in rape culture and all men are sexist pigs. Or you'd have people on the right saying, "Aha, this is proof that all people who donate to the Democrats are sexist pigs." No, they wouldn't. The political parties wouldn't even comment on this at all. They would come out most likely and say, "Why should I be expected to comment on the perversions of a private Hollywood producer? What he did was sick and wrong. That's all I have to say on it." But now we've become so culturally numb to this sexually charged culture where women are being objectified almost 24/7. That and where that's encouraged, mind you, the people who claim that there's a sexual all these so-called feminists who are coming out right now, they never had an issue. Remember, they never had an issue with the sexual objectification of women in Hollywood up until now, when it could suddenly be politicized and used as a weapon against men.
Right.
The problem is that nobody wants to have an actual serious conversation about what has gone so wrong in our culture where this kind of attitude became prevalent in Hollywood in the first place. Nobody wants to have that conversation, so instead they turn to the political divisions.
Well, let's have that conversation then, Josh, because I'm in agreement with you. But what do you think went wrong in America? And I understand we could do a whole nother podcast on this, and maybe at some point we will. But just being,
I think we're gonna have to go through a lot of podcasts to answer the question of what went wrong in America, Sam.
But,
I think we're gonna have to do a whole series on that.
Sam Whitfield and Joshua Johnson present what went wrong in America, part 1 of a 20-part series. So, but no, just kind of cliff notes as best you can. What do you think went wrong? Because I think that you and I, we may have some differences, but we may have a lot of similarities.
Well, this is a complex question. It's sort of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because dating back to the Roman Empire, dating back to ancient history, there has always been there's always been the temptation of sex.
Yeah.
We see it in the Old Testament in particular with Sodom and Gomorrah. But as civilization developed, as Christianity took hold throughout the Western world anyway, we learned to rise above these sinful instincts we have, these animalistic and I think you know what I'm talking about, Sam. When I say animalistic, you know that there's the natural drive in men and women to have sex, and that can become obsessive for some people, like Harvey, apparently, very quickly. But as Christianity spread throughout the Western world, people learned to rise above that and to hold themselves to a higher standard. And unfortunately, we men did not always hold ourselves to the higher standard, and this led to the creation of the so-called double standard, which is women asking, well, Harry gets to sleep around with whoever he wants, and everybody thinks he's great and manly, but if I sleep around with whomever I want, it makes me a whore. And for some reason along the line, and again, ladies and gentlemen, I am abbreviating all of this terribly because quite frankly, as we just mentioned, this kind of stuff you can't just talk about in 15, 20 minutes. But we are. And so I'm trying to abbreviate as best I can. So forgive me if there are some generalizations made here. But anyways, along come the feminists, and they say that, well, if men can sleep with whomever they want and it's a great thing, then women deserve to sleep with whomever they want, and that's great too. They didn't say let's hold men to a higher standard. To me, that would seem to be the logical conclusion. Well, why don't we hold men to the same standards we're held to? That to me would seem to be the logical standard. But instead, they're like, let's all race to the bottom and be as hedonistic as we can be. But anyways, as you can imagine, when women start going around and acting incredibly sexually, then the men who already weren't generally holding themselves to the highest of standards to begin with begin to take advantage of that. And you're already asking, Josh, what the hell does this have to do with Harvey Weinstein and Hollywood?
I'm not, because I see where you're going with this, but yeah, I mean I can
I'm glad you do, Sam, because I'm just winging it. But I'm just joking. I'm just joking. But anyways, for less discerning members of the audience, they might be asking, Josh, where the hell are you going with this? And where I'm going with it is that in Hollywood, when this first got started, people like to think that the casting couch only did well. Not Hollywood, even acting. As long as we've had acting, even back in Europe, in the days of Shakespeare, in the days of the Globe Theater, you had men who were not holding themselves to high standards, attempting to use their position to pressure women to sleep with them.
Well, except I do want to make one correction, as kind of a a culture historian. Back in Shakespeare's days, all the women were played by, all the female parts were played by young boys.
Well, yeah, there were. Yeah, sorry. I mean, I shouldn't have used that as an example. Sorry about that.
No,
I just remembered that when you brought that up. Yeah, that's a great point.
no, but it actually does kind of work the same way. I mean, I can imagine that, just like there were, you know, there were play producers, or whatever the term was back then, molesting young boys. I can imagine that there were,
Well, I'm sure that did happen, unfortunately.
yeah.
But as it pertains to women, what I should have said is that this dates back to as long as women have been acting in any capacity, men have tried to say, well, men in positions of power would try to exploit them sexually in order to get them a career or whatever. But it began to become more and more of a problem when the women began to sort of embrace it. And I think you know what I mean by that. I'm not going to say if there are any actresses in particular who did this, because I can think of a few, but I don't know definitively, so I won't say. But you had women who sort of normalized it because they figured, well, I'll just sleep my way to the top, basically. And I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm not saying that justifies it. But what happened was you had, and again, ladies and gentlemen, this is really, I don't feel too comfortable discussing this all right here because it is really, really complex. And I don't think we can do it justice here in just a few minutes. But,
I
should say there were some women in Hollywood, not just Hollywood, but in acting in general, who came out and said, well, look, the men are trying to exploit us for their own, exploit our professional desires for their own sexual gain. Why don't I just decide that I'll sleep my way to the top and I'll use my sex as a weapon, so to speak? Not a weapon, but as a tool to climb to the top. It cheapened women, really. And then you had some women, unfortunately, who chose to sort of enable that. And that's all I'm going to say on that for now, because again, Sam, really, we could do a separate podcast on this, because I don't think we're going to be able to accurately or it's a deep topic.
No, right, and I agree, and I apologize for kind of asking you to do the Cliff Notes version, but I do think it was.
There's no problem with the Cliff Notes version. It's just that when you do the Cliff Notes version, it begins to sort of sound like you're pinning all the blame on one side, and it's not really. I think we're all at fault here.
Right.
Well, not everybody in the sense that you and I are guilty, but they're both men and women at fault for what happened.
Well, it's such a complex issue that we could do a 3-hour pen with multiple people on this, which, hey, that gives me an idea, actually. So maybe for a future episode at some point down the line. But yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I also think that I also think that I'm not trying to be snobby here or anything like this, but to you and I mean we're pretty tuned in to politics and culture, and as Andrew Breitbart used to famously say, politics is downstream from culture. So, having said that, people like you and I who are tuned into this, we pay attention to stuff like this, and we have for a long time. Uh, you know, unsimilar, I think there are a lot of people in this country who might not pay as much attention to this type of stuff, and so when it does come out, it shocks them. And I think that the social media aspect of all of this really amplifies things too, because now everyone can get on a soapbox and comment on this too. So
I don't have any additional comment to make on it. I suppose. I mean, yeah, you're spot on social media though.
yeah, um, so
No, bottom line for Harvey Weinstein for me is this: the media has decided to focus on the political divisions, or well, not the political. Well, yeah, they have, but they've chosen to politicize this in order to divert attention away from the actual issue, which is how incredibly debauched our culture has become in terms of sexual morality, as to allow for something like this to go on for so long. They don't want to have that conversation because don't forget they were the ones who pushed this kind of, the left pushed the transactional nature of sex. They're the ones who said, well, hey, look, you give me something, I'll give you something, and that's how this got started. They
well,
they they have cheapened sex to something that can be bought and sold. They have removed the sacredness from the conjugal act, and that's really the conversation we should be having. We should be having a conversation about what sex has become in our culture, but nobody wants to have that conversation, unfortunately. And so instead, they focus on trying to politicize this as in a way as to either damn all men as sexist, racist pigs, or as a way to slander all liberals as being sexist, racist pigs.
I would agree with you mostly. Just playing devil's advocate though. I assume you've heard the joke about what is the oldest profession in the world, and
It's not really a joke. The fact, isn't it?
well, yeah. It's kind of a humorous fact, depending on how you tell. I mean, I mean, I guess a lot of this, does go back to the beginnings of civilization, which is a whole nother thing that we could get into. But I do think you're right. That in modern society we do tend to cheapen this stuff. I also think that like you said, people are using this as as a uh, as a political tool. I mean, Sean White or whatever his face is called, the Black Lives Matter guy. Sean King. Sorry, I forgot his name there for a sec. He immediately tried comparing Harvey Weinstein to Donald Trump, and saying that we basically have Harvey Weinstein in the White House, which
The key difference you have to remember between Donald Trump and the Harvey Weinstein allegations is that Donald Trump was, and this does not, in no way does this justify what he said, but he was, it would seem to me, just engaging in some of that vulgar Hollywood joking. There were no women that came and specifically said he went and grabbed him by the what, and also what happened to all of Trump's accusers? they all just sort of vanished into thin air, and that's not how this stuff really works. And I'm not saying that I don't believe them, but at the same time, why did they only seem to care about telling their stories to the world and pushing against him when he was losing or when it appeared he was losing a political campaign, but then they just vanished after he won the presidency? Why did the media drop that story? I mean, we know the media hates Donald Trump. And if there were all these women out there that Trump had supposedly sexually assaulted, how come the media just let them vanish into thin air after the election? It's because the narrative was no longer convenient, and likely those women may have just been making up stories. We really can't say for sure.
Well, and Gavin McInnes made the point on his podcast on CRTV a few days ago, which, like or not, it's true. If you look at Hollywood these days in celebrityism, a lot of these, Trump in that video said, and keep in mind, I think the other thing about this video was this leaked tape was from 2004, way before he even had presidential aspirations of or political aspirations of any kind, as far as I know of. So that was one thing, but then the other thing was Trump said that a lot of these women, they'll let you grab them in those regions because
that's exactly the problem in Hollywood, though. It's like I said, we have cheapened sex and turned it into some sort of transactional activity, and it's really not. It was never designed to be that.
Right,
the important point to remember on Trump, though, was that it would seem, anyway, from what we know, that there was no evidence whatsoever that he actually sexually assaulted anybody. With Weinstein, we have upwards of 50 women. We have an audio tape of him actually trying to force a young woman to watch him take a shower. We have evidence with Weinstein. With Trump, there was no evidence whatsoever. There was just what these women said during the campaign, and then conveniently they all vanished after the campaign was over. Right. And the media didn't even follow up with them as though there was nothing there to report on.
Right. Well, and then and then in terms of that one Miss America contestant, it was later revealed, that there was some shady stuff on her that, I guess that her boyfriend at the time was like a Mexican drug lord or something like that. So these things cut both ways to a certain extent. But anyway, I think it's. I will say the only good thing about this story, and I'm not saying the Harvey Weinstein aspect of what he did was good. Don't misunderstand, ladies and gentlemen. But what I'm saying is, I think the awareness that this stuff exists in Hollywood is good, because maybe there will actually be a push to actually change the culture. Hopefully, but like Josh, I'm a little pessimistic that will happen at this time. So who knows?
No, they're not even willing to have the conversation about what really caused all this. They're too willing to ignore the cause of this and to instead focus on the political aspects of it. And yeah, there's the talk about how rampant this is in Hollywood, but make no mistake, it's going on right now still.
Oh yeah.
It's going on, right now. There are still cases. I guarantee you, as we speak tonight, there's probably some poor girl who wants to be in a movie who some other producer is treating exactly like Harvey treated people. They're not willing to actually change the what's going on there, because they're not willing to have the conversation that needs to be had about these kind of issues and about sexual morality.
Or some poor boy too. That's another thing, which I don't want to get into conspiracy theories here, but the rumor, I heard a rumor a few months ago. I can't confirm it as such. Yeah, but I've heard rumors that one of the reasons why all that pedophilia stuff about Milo Yiannopoulos came out a few months ago was because he was actually working to expose some velvet rope pedophilia ring in Hollywood. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the velvet rope refers to the gay sect of Hollywood. Again, I don't know if that was true that he was working on an expose, but if true, the timing of that whole thing is pretty interesting. So, do you have anything to say on that, or?
I don't follow. I mean, I don't study Hollywood particularly that much. So, to me, this whole thing is really, I quite frankly, I think the Weinstein. I think there are other. Don't get me wrong; it's important. Well, he broke the law. He deserves to be prosecuted. He deserves probably to be in jail. But I think at this point the way the media has obsessed over this story, I don't understand it particularly. I think there are other bigger issues they could be reporting on, but that's just my particular opinion. And don't misunderstand me. That's not meant to disrespect the victims at all. I feel deeply for all of them. I'll keep them all in my prayers. And this man does deserve to go to jail for what he's done to them. But we'll see what happens. Right now, it seems like the media is just reporting on the same old facts over and over again every day. The only real new thing that broke recently being that his brother was a bit of a jerk too. So
yeah, and speaking of the media kind of moving on to other things, we're kind of segueing into another thing. I guess there's this big controversy with Trump and the Gold Star families now, which honestly, I'm not really sure what happened there. Josh, it seemed like you had some more information on this.
This I can give you the QuickBooks take on. So as I'm sure you at least I'm gonna assume you and our audience know the basic facts of the case.
Yeah,
But the United States has been in Niger or Niger, as I've noticed many on the cable news networks referring to it as. We've been there for some years now, helping to fight radical Islamic terror organizations like Boko Haram. And so these four Marines were out on a reconnaissance mission. They had gone on at least, I think, over 16 missions previously. Same guys, same recon team, and they had no incident. So the Pentagon had no reason to suspect that they were going to be attacked. But unfortunately, they were. They were ambushed by about 50 to 100 ISIS fighters. Well, not ISIS, Islamic terrorist fighters. And as I'm sure you can tell, 50 to 100 versus 4 are not good odds. The reconnaissance aircraft was not even overhead to support them. So they were pinned down under fire for about 30 minutes before a French fighter jet came and provided some aerial support. And then a French helicopter actually had to come and evacuate them. And I think by that point they were either dead or they were wounded and they died in transit. One of them, the young black gentleman, LaDavid Johnson, was actually left behind and was sort of off the radar for 3 days until they finally found his body. And so that was the woman in particular. Trump called his fiance and tried to and it's important to note that he had asked General John Kelly, who had lost his own son in Afghanistan some years before, what he should do or how he should say this to them. And apparently Kelly advised him that there's nothing you can say that's going to help these people. I would recommend not doing the call at all. But Trump decided to do the call, and he called LaDavid Johnson's widow, and apparently I forget her name, but this particular woman's congresswoman or congressional representative, an African American gal who is fond of god awful ugly cowboy hats, apparently decided to listen in on the call, which is deeply disrespectful. But apparently they'll do anything to get Trump, I guess. It's just another sign of our moral decline. And so she claimed that Trump basically was disrespectful to the grieving widow because he said to her that her son knew what he was signing up for.
Or the
To me,
yeah,
to
or
me,
the,
that doesn't sound like a problem because I tend to agree with General Kelly that, well, when you sign up for the military, you know that you're pretty brave. You know that you are basically signing up with the with an asterisk next to your name that says by signing this you may volunteer to make the ultimate sacrifice for your country. And I think that's what Trump was trying to say, but this particular Democrat congresswoman has twisted it way out of proportion to make it sound like he was disrespecting a Gold Star family. And and then after after all this happened, apparently that same congresswoman was asked earlier today what she thinks about this, and she was bragging that she's a rock star now for causing this uproar over this particular Gold Star family, and it just blows my mind how selfish this woman can be.
yeah,
Because the family, because the family, their business, the fact that her fiance, her husband to be, died, is now being constantly replayed over and over again on the national news, and it's not giving her the time she needs to grieve. And it's also this congresswoman could come out and say, "Oh, I'm a rock star now." That's incredibly disrespectful, but they try and twist it and pin it like Trump was the guy who did something wrong. It's amazing.
I've always said since the beginning of January, uh, to my friends and family, I said one of the reasons I don't watch the one of the reasons I don't watch the news anymore, other than research for my columns or my podcasts, are because the media is going to do, the mainstream media is going to do whatever they can to uh, subvert and demonize Trump. And so most of the time, it's not even worth reading the headlines because, they're not even trying to start out of the gate neutral. And, to be fair, I guess, you know, we here at American Watchmen and other conservative outlets, we're not really starting from ground zero of neutrality either. But I would say the difference, at least for me personally, is I've never tried to brand myself as like an unbiased, commentator or something. I've always been very upfront that I'm a conservative and a nationalist populist, and whereas the rest of the media isn't. So, but that just goes to prove how crazy everything thing is. So next topic on the docket, trying to move along here, unless did you have anything else to say on the topic, or did we pretty much cover everything there was to say?
I've covered the facts of the case and I've offered up my opinion on it. I think she was incredibly disrespectful, and for what? So she could be a rock star. She's going to drag one of her constituents' private lives at a time of intense loss and grieving. She's going to drag them through the national media spotlight over and over again so she can score a cheap political point on the president. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. The one thing I do have here in my notes on her, I do want to bring up here too, and this isn't really you probably want to care about this, Josh, but this woman is a Florida congresswoman too, and so I would just urge my fellow Floridians who are listening here, if you're in her district, then you want to vote this congresswoman out in the next election cycle because clearly she's not helping the district she represents, and she's just trying to score political points. So, time to vote her out is what I would say. But moving on, speaking of Florida, famed white nationalist moron idiot Richard Spencer came to speak at the University of Florida in Tallahassee on Thursday afternoon / evening, And this made headlines because Governor Rick Scott decided to declare a state of emergency, which some on the right think was an idiotic decision to do, and I'm kind of split 50-50 on that. On the one hand, I would agree that it's kind of idiotic and that we shouldn't really pay much attention to Richard Spencer, and I'll get into that in a sec. But the other half of me does think that Governor Scott made a good decision that if we had to put police out there, that declaring a state of emergency would be good, because as I've learned in the past year of being a Floridian, and after kind of living through my first major hurricane here, I learned a few things. That a state of emergency here in Florida, during a state of emergency, when the police tell you to do something and you disobey, the penalty is a lot harsher for those to disobey a cop. The sentences last a lot longer than, I guess, when there isn't a state of emergency. And so Scott's justification was to deter Antifa and the neo-Nazis from starting crap even more. That was kind of his reasoning for doing what he did. And like I said, on the one hand, I can see where he's coming from, but on the other hand, Josh and I were both talking about this before the show. The best solution is to kind of ignore Richard Spencer. And Josh, you had some things that you wanted to say on this topic, so.
Well, I didn't think the state of emergency was a good idea, because I think it just gives Richard Spencer the attention that he so desperately craves and needs to pretend that he's relevant. How many people show up at these events of his, even at the one that he did end up doing in Florida? I think they said that the ratio was 10-1 protesters versus supporters. I mean, he's a neo-Nazi. He has no real political pull beyond overgrown in their 40s living in their mother's basement.
Or college fraternity boys who think that Nazi memes are the funniest thing around. So
yeah, I mean he's not relevant, but what he is very good at is getting the media to pretend that he is by giving him attention. And so I think that in that respect, I don't think that the state of emergency actually did anything. And you said at the beginning there that the state of emergency makes it easier to control Antifa or something to that effect. Well,
in theory,
it's not so much disobeying a police officer. It's the problem. It's when they assault other people and destroy property, and the same goes for Spencer and his Nazis. It's when they assault other people and destroy property that it becomes a problem, because then they've broken the law. And so to me, it would seem to make more sense not to declare a state of emergency. Just ignore that he's coming. Let him come to his event. If people show up and start breaking the law and get rowdy, have police ready and ready at standby to go in and arrest them and enforce the law. To me, that's straightforward enough. But the state of emergency to me just doesn't make sense, because it gives him the attention he wants.
I would agree with you on that. My problem with Spencer, and I've said this before too, and this kind of goes back to why part of me does support the state of emergency. Even if the governor did ignore the fact that Spencer was coming, let's just say that he did, and he didn't do anything. The mainstream media is obsessed with Richard Spencer, and I said this back before Charlottesville even happened. I said, you guys want to stop neo-Nazism? The best thing to do for all the media outlets is to just ignore this rally in Charlottesville. Don't do anything. Just completely ignore it. and of course the media didn't. They had to have all of their, TV trucks and camera crews and reporters and all that stuff. And then Charlottesville happened the way it happened because the media was giving them the attention that they wanted. And so, again, I have agreed with what you're saying, but then I also feel like if Governor Scott, who I really respect as a governor, who did a great job with the hurricane handling here, if he did ignore Richard Spencer like you and I think he should have, then the media would have also crucified him for ignoring Spencer. So, so I guess my whole, I guess kind of a theme for this.
Here's what I guess I would say to that, though, Sam. Let the media crucify him. The Republican, if you're a Republican in this country, the media is not your friend to begin with.
Right.
So to me, to me, enacting policies in order to prevent the media from getting upset that we didn't do enough or that we did too much or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter what he did. I mean, had something actually happened and had the event actually turned violent, I guarantee that there would have been somebody in the media, at least somewhere, saying, "Oh, well, this violence wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the heavy police presence and state of emergency." They'll always find a way to twist it back against you if you're a Republican.
Right. Yeah. I would. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, like I just said. I mean, it is. I mean, it's a very sticky wicket where where Richard Spencer is concerned. So, most of the time I ignore him and I ignore his supporters. So I just know that people were wanting me to cover this on the podcast because it was more of a local issue. In air quotes, Papa Bad. But anyway. And then I know we're kind of winding down the show. Were there any topics that you wanted to bring up? And
perhaps next time. I'll be honest with you. I'm just ready to hit the hay. So
yes.
It's been a long day.
Yeah, same here. It's almost midnight here, ladies and gentlemen. So, but anyway, Josh, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me either at AmericanWatchman.org or at jjohnson_AW on Twitter. I am also on Instagram at Joshua Johnson 2016, I think. No, 2017. Who cares about the Instagram account? We got the important one. We got the Twitter and the AW.
I have an Instagram too, and it's linked on my website, but I never promote that on my podcast. Mainly because my Instagram is non-political, but I really should promote that more. But it's the same. It's the same as my Twitter handle. So, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, quick reminder before we end the show: if you like this podcast, please go to iTunes and the Google Play store and give us a 5-star review rating over there for the Whitfield Report. That really helps me know how you like the show, and it gives us an opportunity to potentially monetize the show later on down the road and get more recognition. So please go ahead and do that. And as always, thanks for listening. And God bless and God save this great nation. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Whitfield Report. God bless.